79 years ago, on July 20th, 1944, an event occurred that many believe could have changed the course of the Second World War and stopped war earlier, but other historians do not agree with it. They believe that it would not have changed anything at all. But nevertheless, there are many different conspiracy versions, mythology, and unsolved mysteries. Today, we will talk about Operation Valkyrie, the attempt to assassinate Adolf Hitler. Let's figure out what happened on this date and what preceded before. The classic version of this event says that the officers of the Third Reich Wehrmacht understood that the war was already lost and decided to get Germany out of a bad situation by killing Hitler and reaching an agreement with the USSR, England, and America. But they didn't succeed and the plan failed. Hitler was saved by a strong oak table, and all the conspirators were found and killed. In fact, the roots of this assassination attempt are much deeper and go back to 1938, before the war period. There is a version that the German army was a monolithic killing machine. This is partly true, but in reality there are no unified systems as such. And in any powerful system there will always be subsystems, and just like in any other organization, different departments can compete with each other and quarrel. The majority of ministers participating in the Third Reich certainly shared Hitler's ideas 100%, but there were also those who could not perceive these ideas properly. And the roots of the assassination attempt on Hitler lie precisely in the structure of the Wehrmacht. This structure was actually quite interesting. The elite and noble blood that was created and formed over centuries in East Prussia. This elite consisted of the officer command staff of the German army. These people wrote military doctrines for Germany. One of the famous ones, for example, Helmut James von Moltke, is also a person who came from a similar kind of aristocratic elite. His grandson Helmut James Moltke would be one of the participants in Operation Valkyrie. At the beginning there was a monarchy in Germany. After the loss of the First World War, the Weimar Republic is formed in Germany, and then Hitler comes to power with a very simple idea. The nation is thirsting for revenge, the nation is humiliated, the nation is imposed huge reparations which it must pay. The country had just lost the First World War and Germany needed a new leader, and Hitler became that person. At the same time, the military elite about which we spoke above, including various large magnates and other rich people in Germany, openly despised Hitler because Hitler was a half-educated corporal. Although Hitler himself always referred to the fact that he was a simple German soldier, as a millions others. But despite this, they despised him because he was uneducated in their opinion, and not from their military circle and noble blood. But when Hitler comes to power in the German army, the same Prussian elite sets the unspoken rules. The army is always outside of politics. Politicians come and go, but the army must always stand guard over Germany. This was their philosophy until Hitler left the army alone. Hitler dealt with the communists and then with his party comrades. But at some point Hitler reached the army and began to change it. Hitler never trusted the Wehrmacht generals. Even before the outbreak of World War II, even before the Polish invasion, Hitler had already begun to make attempts to take control of the army. The generals of the German army were mostly Christians. They were unconditional monarchists and with a huge sense of duty. It was very difficult for many conspirators to overcome this sense of duty, realizing that Hitler, although a villain, was still their supreme commander, and an assassination attempt was contrary to the principles, honor, and ideals of a German officer. At some point, Hitler creates the SS. Heinrich Himmler becomes the commander. At first, the SS plays the role of Hitler's personal guard, but after a while the SS grows and becomes an army. The SS has all the attributes of an army, such as tanks and artillery, and this turns out to be an army within the army itself. At some point, the SS and the Wehrmacht begin to compete with each other. When Hitler announces that Germany need to start preparing for war, preparing an offensive to Poland and France, Wehrmacht generals oppose. They tell Hitler that the war was recently lost and that the army is not strong enough to launch such operations. In 1938, a big scandal occurs in the German army. General Werner von Blomberg, the Minister of War, and General von Fritsch, the commander of the ground forces, oppose the start of the war. Hitler doesn't like this and wants to get rid of them, but arresting them and sending them to a concentration camp as traitors is difficult. The generals are very famous and enjoy great popularity. So Hitler comes up with a more cunning plan. Hitler begins the process with the goal of discrediting and removing him from general positions. Blomberg becomes the first person against whom they begin to seek information in order to discredit him. In January 1938, he married 25-year-old Secretary Eva Grun. The best man at their wedding was Hermann Göring, and Hitler was present at the wedding. Soon, in an unexpected way, it turned out that Eva Grun had worked as a masseuse in her mother's salon before her marriage and was generally a girl of easy virtue and had long been on the radar of the police. There was even information that she posed for pornographic postcards. The case of the general's wife, with delicate details and photographs, reached the desk of the chairman of the Berlin police. Hitler and Göring saw this as an undermining of the authority of the Wehrmacht, and they demanded that the general divorce his wife. He refused. The information got into the newspaper, and he was removed from his position. Next was General Fitch. He is accused of homosexuality. He refuses to admit these accusations. A trial takes place. In the end, the case is dropped, but he left the army. After these events, Himmler's position is strengthened and Hitler becomes supreme commander. Hitler achieved his goal. Wehrmacht no longer had such influence. The Wehrmacht generals did not forget this and began to create conspiracies. The conspiracy is initiated by one of the most influential Wehrmacht generals, Hans Paul Oster. A huge number of the same influential people in the Wehrmacht join Oster. Many of the generals who were among the conspirators later fought on the battlefields of World War II. General Franz Halder, Wilhelm Canaris, Walter von Brauchitsch. The main goal of the conspiracy was to kill Hitler, arrest all of Hitler's closest associates and party leaders, restoration of the monarchy and negotiations with Great Britain. Hitler is already planning an attack on Czechoslovakia, and the generals understand that this is the beginning of a new war and immediately begin to achieve their goals. If Germany attacked Czechoslovakia, Great Britain would immediately declare war on Germany, France would join, and a World War I scenario would begin. The generals enter into secret negotiations with Britain and tell them their plan. Britain agrees, and the generals begin to develop an assassination plan to kill Hitler. But soon Great Britain makes a statement that the authorities do not intend to declare war if Germany enters Czechoslovakia. The Munich Agreement is signed between Germany, Great Britain, France, and Italy, and the Allies surrender Czechoslovakia. Britain adopts a strategy of giving up a small piece to appease Hitler. The generals understand that the conspiracy will not work and they have no accomplices in Europe. The conspiracy fell apart. But miraculously, the conspiracy was not discovered and Britain did not hand over the generals who secretly negotiated with them. The conspiracy will be revealed only in 1945, when Canaris's diaries are found, where he wrote everything down. The generals go to the front, maintaining contact with each other whenever possible. But there are no longer any special attempts or talks about killing Hitler. Treskov gets in touch with General Friedrich Olbricht, commander of the German Reserve Army. It is the Reserve Army that will be relied upon. The Reserve Army was needed to suppress the insurrection in the event of an attempt to overthrow Hitler. According to the plan of the conspirators, after the assassination of Hitler, the Reserve Army was supposed to arrest all the social leaders of the Third Reich. In 1942, Olbricht places the Valkyrie plan on Hitler's desk, which implied the deployment of a reserve army in Berlin and other cities in the event of an uprising and in the event of a rebellion. According to the plan, there was to be a seizure of the main buildings in Germany, the capture of the rebels, the capture of officials and leaders from any departments who joined the rebels, where there was a suspicion that they were participants in the rebellion. And the most important thing is the isolation of the party elite, since Hitler understood that rebels could be among the closest circle. Therefore, in the event of a mutiny, they had to be isolated with the help of a reserve army. Hitler signed this plan, and the rebels decided to use it against Hitler himself. The first assassination attempt occurs in 1943, when Hitler plans to visit Smolensk on the Eastern Front to cheer up the soldiers and personally support them. Treskov and Schlabrendorf place explosives on Hitler's plane. The place where Hitler sat was additionally armored, and Hitler's seat was equipped with a catapult so that if something happened, Hitler could eject. Plus, the Condor itself always flew accompanied by fighters. The general gave 2 bottles of whiskey to Lieutenant Colonel Heinz Brandt and asked him to give them to his friend who living in the German capital. Heinz Brandt agreed, unaware that one of the bottles contained explosives. The conspirators activated the chemical primer and set the explosives on a timer. An hour later, the plane was supposed to explode, but this did not happen, and the plane successfully landed. According to the main version, due to the low temperature, the chemical reaction was slowed down, and the bomb did not explode. Schlabrendorf had to look for a plausible excuse to urgently fly to Berlin himself. He said that he mixed up the bottles and took the explosive drinks from the unsuspecting officer Brandt. In the conspiracy itself, they were divided into two camps. The first believed that after the assassination of Hitler and the implementation of their plan to seize power, they would immediately begin negotiations with America, Britain, and the Soviet Union to end the war and save Germany. However, there was a second group of people who also wanted to negotiate peace with America and Britain, but they wanted to continue the war with the Soviet Union. Many Wehrmacht officers hated the communists, and in particular the Soviet Union, the only thing that united them with Hitler. This was precisely the main controversial issue among the conspirators. The main motive for the conspiracy was that they understood that the war would be lost. They realized this even before the start of the war, and in 1944, it was already inevitable. Nevertheless, they were patriots of Germany, and it was the fact of defeat in the war that forced them to go against the oath they took. In August 1943, von Treschow met the main character of this operation, Colonel Klaus von Stauffenberg. His family is very old. Everyone in the family is military. He was a very experienced and talented officer. He supported Hitler when he came to power, sharing with him the ideas that the Treaty of Versailles was unfair and that Germany should not pay reparations. He also believed that all of this happened because of betrayal, and it was the Jews and communists who betrayed Germany. When there was an invasion of Poland, Stauffenberg wrote in his diaries that Poland was a dark country, consisting of Poles, Gypsies, and Jews, and that the only thing the Polish population understood was the whip. Stauffenberg was also not against Hitler taking the position of Supreme Commander-in-Chief. According to the evidence of his diaries, the words of his wife, and those who knew him, he began to change after 1942. He began to see mass executions of civilians taking place in Russia, Poland, and France. He ended up disillusioned with Hitler. He would be transferred to serve in Africa, where the most famous general of the German army, Rommel, or as he is called, the Desert Fox, was also fighting. Rommel was the only general who was not guilty of war crimes. Stauffenberg's car comes under air raid. He loses an eye, loses all the fingers on his right hand, suffers severe damage to the skull that causes fighting. Nevertheless, he remains alive. He is transported to Germany and begins to undergo rehabilitation, after which he is transferred to the command of the Reserve Army. For the conspirators, it would be difficult to find a more valuable person than Stauffenberg. He is considered a hero in all the newspapers, but most importantly, he is very disappointed in Hitler. Von Treschow and Stauffenberg very quickly find a common language, and Stauffenberg agrees that Hitler needs to be killed as soon as possible. Stauffenberg is assigned to Hitler's headquarters in the Wolf's Lair. The Wolf's Lair is located in East Prussia. He constantly flies from Berlin to the Wolf's Lair and participates in all army meetings. Hitler values him very much. A decorated military officer who lost an eye, fingers, and became disabled, but returned to duty and continued his service. The conspirators understand that this is the best place to kill Hitler. Stauffenberg makes 2 attempts on July 11th and 15, but he decides to interrupt the operation since Himmler and Göring do not come there. At that time, the conspirators were planning to kill the entire top leadership in one place. July 20th, before flying to the Wolf's Lair, Klaus von Stauffenberg met with his brother Berthold and told him the words that he wrote in his diary: "Whoever finds the courage to do this will go down in history as a traitor, but if he refuses to do this, then will be a traitor to his conscience." The decision was made on July 20th. It was necessary to kill Hitler regardless of whether he was alone or not. When Stauffenberg arrives in Berlin, Field Marshal Wilhelm Keitel tells Stauffenberg that the meeting scheduled for 1 p.m. will be half an hour earlier. Mussolini arrived in Germany and Hitler will have to meet him. Stauffenberg says that he would like to change his shirt, and accompanied by Haften, hurries to the room of Adjutant Keitel von Freyend, where he activates the detonator. Just as Stauffenberg was trying to activate the second detonator, Oberfeldwebel Werner Vogel appeared at the door and said that he should call General Feldgebel. As a result, Stauffenberg did not have time to activate the second explosive, and Haften put it in his briefcase. On the way to headquarters, Stauffenberg handed Keitel's adjutant his briefcase and asked for a place at the table closer to Hitler, as he could not hear very well due to his injuries. He stood on the right next to Hitler and placed the briefcase with the bomb under the table at Hitler's feet. Soon after, Stauffenberg said he needed to make a call and went out into the corridor with his adjutant. There, he asked to be connected with General Feldjebel. After giving instructions to the telephone operator, the adjutant returned to the operations room. Stauffenberg picked up the phone, immediately put it down, and left the barracks, leaving his cap there to indicate that he would return soon. A few minutes later, there was an explosion in the barracks. Of the 24 people present at the meeting, 4 people were killed. General Schmundt, General Korten, Colonel Brandt, and stenographer Berger, and the rest got various injuries. Hitler suffered a severe bruise on the hand he was leaning on the table at the time of the explosion, as well as ruptured eardrums, ear bleeding, and abrasions. His trousers were torn to shreds by the blast wave. Immediately after the explosion, Stauffenberg and Heften got into a waiting car with a driver from the Führer's escort battalion and went to the airfield. At about 1 o'clock, they miraculously managed to leave the Wolf's Lair. Along the way, Heften threw out a second package of explosives. At the airfield, they boarded aircraft provided by General Wagner. At 1:15 p.m., the plane took off. Hitler survived thanks to Officer Heinz Brandt. When Stauffenberg left the room, Brandt took his place and moved the briefcase with the bomb, which was in his way, to another location. When the explosion occurred, a large oak table overturned and shielded Hitler from the shrapnel. Everything that happened next was documented minute by minute. At 1 o'clock in the afternoon, Goebbels received a call from headquarters and was informed about the explosion. He was not told who was alive and who was dead. At that moment, Ulbricht called the head of the Reserve Army, General Fromm, and announced the Valkyrie plan. He stated that there was a rebellion in Germany and that it was urgent to take control of all government buildings. It was essential to arrest Himmler, Goebbels, Göring, and all the top political figures of the Third Reich. Fromm refused to carry out the order and stated that he needed to call headquarters. For refusing to comply, Fromm was arrested and taken into custody. The conspirators began sending telegrams from the headquarters of the Reserve Army. "We have rebellion. Hitler is killed. Arrest all high-ranking members of the SS and NSDAP. Take control of all state buildings in the cities." Simultaneously, another telegram was sent out from the Wolf's Lair. "Hitler is alive. The assassination attempt failed. Do not follow orders from the headquarters of the Reserve Army. Wait for Hitler's order." The only city where the Valkyrie plan was successfully implemented was Paris, where thousands of SS and NSDAP members were arrested. In Berlin, at 4 p.m., Ulbricht gave the order for Operation Valkyrie. At 4:30 p.m., Stauffenberg and Heften finally arrived at the Bendler block. Stauffenberg told those present, "He is dead. I saw how they carried him out." However, he was informed that he was mistaken and that Hitler was alive. Nevertheless, Stauffenberg insisted that it did not matter and that they must proceed to the end. They must carry out the Valkyrie plan and stage a coup. At 5 o'clock, the Grossdeutschland battalion, in accordance with the Valkyrie plan, takes control of the government quarter, cordons off this area, and begins to slowly advance through the city. At 5:30, Goebbels, who is the only one taking action at this moment, calls Adolf Hitler's 1st SS Panzer Division. He realizes that there is a conspiracy in the Wehrmacht and that he needs to call the SS. He reports that there is a mutiny in Germany and that they urgently need to enter the capital. The SS has doubts at the beginning because they don't want a civil war to start. By 7 p.m., the Grossdeutschland battalion already controlled the entire city. At the same time, Major Otto Ernst Riemer enters the German propaganda building to arrest Goebbels. He reports that he needs to arrest Goebbels and isolate him in accordance with the Valkyrie plan. Goebbels tells Römer that the Valkyrie plan no longer exists. Hitler is alive and then connects Römer with Hitler. Hitler himself is talking to Römer on the phone and says that no more orders need to be carried out. The Valkyrie plan no longer exists. Operation Valkyrie was used to remove the leader, but the rebels did not succeed. After which Römer turns his troops against the conspirators and takes control of the capital. At 9 p.m. tanks are driven into the city. At 11 p.m. all conspirators are arrested. The head of the Army Reserve, Fromm, who refused to carry out the order, is released from arrest at 11 p.m. He immediately gives the order to arrest Stauffenberg, Ulbricht, and all the officers and generals who are in the reserve army. At 12 p.m. he interrogates them all, and at 12:15 p.m., 15 minutes later, they are all shot in the courtyard. During the execution, Stauffenberg, who was wounded in the shoulder during his arrest, shouts, "Long live Holy Germany." According to one version, Fromm shot them so quickly because he himself was one of the conspirators. However, at the last moment he got scared when he realized that everything was not going as planned. He staged his own impromptu arrest, and when he was released, he quickly shot everyone so that no one would betray him. 12:30 at night, Fromm calls Hitler and reports the rebellion was suppressed by him personally. Paris was the only place where the operation succeeded. After all the arrested SS officers were released, they celebrated by drinking until morning and having fun. That the rebellion was suppressed. On the night of June 21st, Hitler addressed the nation, proclaiming that an assassination attempt had been orchestrated against him by traitors who had violated their allegiance to the nation and their sworn oath. Hitler stated that he would bring the conspirators to trial, where they would have to suffer the consequences of their actions. "They will all suffer," he declared. The arrests of all those involved who remained alive began immediately. The Gestapo opened a case called Black Capello and began to persecute the conspirators. Within a few months, the Gestapo arrested 600 people. The trial began on August 7th. Many conspirators were hanged on piano strings so that they would not die immediately but rather over a long and painful time. All this was filmed and photographed to show Hitler. The main organizer of the conspiracy, von Tresckow, was on the Eastern Front at that time. Having learned about the failure of the assassination attempt on Hitler and realizing the inevitability of arrest, von Tresckow told his adjutant Fabian von Schlabrendorf, who also participated in the plot, "They will soon find out about me and will try to extract the names of our comrades from me. To warn them, I must sacrifice my life." Schlabrendorf was unable to convince him to abandon his suicide, which the general tried to disguise by faking death in battle in order to save his family members from persecution. In the Black Capella case, 200 people were executed. Many relatives of the conspirators were also repressed and sent to concentration camps. Charges were also brought against the legendary General Rommel. Despite not being directly involved in the conspiracy, it became known during the investigation that he knew about everything. Hitler sent him a letter in which he wrote that he appreciated all his services to Germany, but he must kill himself since he was involved in the conspiracy. Rommel took potassium cyanide and died. Officially, the Nazi authorities announced that General Field Marshal Rommel died as a result of a serious injury received in a car accident during an inspection trip. According to another version, Rommel died from a serious and very rare disease acquired during his years of service in North Africa, for which he was being treated all this time. By order of Hitler, Rommel, as a national hero of Germany, was buried with full military honors. October 18, 1944, the day of his funeral, was declared a day of national mourning. In Germany, until the 1960s, Stauffenberg, Tresckow, and other conspirators were considered traitors because they betrayed the oath, the head of state, and Germany. After the 1960s, the situation began to change. Leftist ideology became very strong in Germany, and the newer generation looked at the conspiracy from a different angle. German society started to perceive them as heroes, people who went against the Nazi machine, against the villain Hitler, and sacrificed themselves for the freedom of Germany. Today, in the Bundeswehr, there is a barracks named after Tresckow. If you liked this video and want more, please subscribe to our channel, click like and leave a comment. Thank you for watching. We really appreciate it, and see you again.